in my private practice, I work with a lot of high performers, and they're just pushing so hard and overloaded with all of the seeming progress we have, right? Which brings about so much suffering at a core level. And then people can't figure out why they're so unhappy. And it's literally because we lost access to the ability to be still.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Grit Meets Growth podcast, where we bring you inspiration and insights focused on getting uncomfortable, making things happen, and creating a magnetic life. If you enjoy the messages you're hearing here, please leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of the podcast. With that, let's get after it. So we are excited to introduce you all to two guests today. We've got Dr. Carli, Braun, Kody, and Ben Durbin with us today. And just as we lead into this, we've got some powerful topics we're going to unpack. We're going to hit on some self-compassion today, stress resilience, performing under pressure, being tuned into the present, mindfulness and brain training, the brain-body, mind to physical connection. And then how does this all tie back to performance? So before we get started, before we go any deeper, you should go grab a pencil and a notebook, because there's going to be some good stuff to take some notes on today. You're going to want to take some notes. Before we dive in, let me just do some quick introductions of these two. So Carli is a licensed psychologist. She's a certified mindfulness teacher and coach, certified Daring Way facilitator. She's a speaker with 23 years of service in the mental health field. And following a series of life-changing athletic injuries and life stressors, Carli turned to meditation, mindfulness, and self-compassion. She developed some committed practices in those areas, which has led to a really deep understanding of what she calls the mind-body instrument. And one of the favorite things that Carli talks about is showing up courageously in our lives, which is one of the things we're going to dig into today. Ben is a 27-year Navy combat veteran who spent the majority of his military career in Naval Special Warfare, operating with SEAL teams in Iraq and Afghanistan. After experiencing the cumulative effects of combat and post-traumatic stress, Ben began a healing journey that restored his relationships, reinvigorated his joy for life, and really reconnected him to humanity. He now teaches mindfulness, meditation, breathwork, and yoga as practices of self-mastery that help people move through the world with the power of an awakened spirit. Together, Carli and Ben are the co-founders of MPeak Team, where they offer coaching and training around mindfulness, stress resilience, performance optimization, well-being, and interpersonal relationships. So just based on those bios, there's going to be a lot of good stuff in this conversation. We've had conversations with both of these guys leading up to this. I know there's going to be a ton of value in here for you guys. So Carli, why don't we start with you? Why don't you talk a little bit about your journey, how you got to kind of where you're at today, and kind of kick things off for us?
Absolutely. I think my journey actually really begins on the personal front. I've always been a learner and been really curious about people and the human experience. And so that led me to a desire to work with people in an intimate way as a psychologist. And another piece that led me to the specifically mindfulness and performance is a series of knee surgeries that started in 95. My most recent one was in 2014. That was my 7th, a partial knee replacement. And then I'll have my 8th, a full knee replacement, which I'm totally, utterly pumped for, which people can't believe. But that's coming up on September 13th. And so that experience, sometimes I think of it as a spiritual one of continually being injured and continually having to bounce back and train and physical therapy. And, it was really humbling. And it was also one that taught me about rising through hard times when we repeatedly get knocked down and we want to live. So we are driven to get back up. And I definitely suffered. I mean, there was a lot of grief. I feel like my knee surgeries, and tossing a brain surgery in there that I went through in my freshman year of college, I became sort of close to mortality and what it means to really show up, like why it matters and why we need to keep rising through hard times. And so in my suffering, I turned to mindfulness. and really sort of dove headfirst into self-compassion. And that was Kristen Neff's work, Kristen Neff and Chris Germer, who developed mindful self-compassion. And that just changed my inner landscape. You know, I come from a really hardworking farming family, hard work ethic, came from, you know, not much money, and we work hard and we appreciate what we have. And there was a lot of perfectionism and just like not letting myself off the hook or have any soft spots with that. And so when I began my self-compassion journey, which is really rooted in mindfulness, things just started to shift. So that led me to, as a psychologist, to deepen my expertise in mindfulness and self-compassion. But yet my high performers, I was using like self-compassion with my high performer athletes. And they'd be like, so, you know, you missed the shot. Could you soften around that? And it was just not taking. Like people were like, I just don't know about this whole self-compassion thing. And so when I discovered MPEAK at University of California, San Diego, I was like, this is the ticket. This is the ticket to really all of the research that is in MPEAK, Mindful Performance Enhancement, Awareness and Knowledge, a long, cumbersome title. All of the knowledge that's in this program, like it's research-based for performance, and embedded in it is self-compassion, which I love. And so it's really this performance-based work that really lights me on fire, because I get to access all of my history as an athlete, and it's so great to serve in this capacity. So yeah, and I love that self-compassion is involved. So yeah, it's my long intro.
Can't take care of others, can't take care of yourself, right?
It's, you know, we say it a lot in the mental health field, but I think a lot of people, whether you're, you know, you're a parent, you're a high performer that's juggling multiple roles, you're a medical professional, you're a lawyer, you're serving, we say it, but we don't really get it from the inside. You know, we think, okay, I'm taking a nap, or I'm exercising, eating well, or whatever, but really on the inside, learning to love ourselves is, I think, where the magic happens. And it's a journey. It really is. So, yeah.
So Ben, why don't you dive in and kind of do the same thing? Share a little bit of your background and kind of how you got to where you're at, and we'll start with that.
Cool. Yeah, so I grew up in Texas, kind of similar to Carli, blue collar family, a lot of military in my family. So I grew up hearing stories about wartime, about hearing all about these experiences, and you know, I wanted to experience the same. I wanted to adventure. That's really why I ended up joining the military. So it was no surprise that I went that direction. That many of the other men in my family, also my sisters, serve in the military currently as well. So like we're all across the board. It's really important to us. So when it comes to meditation and just self-mastery in general, my first introduction was I took traditional karate, Japanese karate in high school. Studied that for several years, and that was my introduction to meditation and the warrior culture of self-mastery and the mind. Through both movement in karate, the kata, the repetitive movement through which one can lose oneself, and also through meditation. There was something that we did in class, before class and at the end as well. So I was introduced to these concepts, and I knew the value. What I didn't have at that time was the discipline, or really the understanding of why it's important to do this stuff every day, and committing to a practice on my own outside of a group setting. So when I joined the military, originally I joined to be a cryptologic linguist, and I was a cryptologic linguist. So I went to language school to learn Arabic in Monterey, California. So a beautiful place. It's just gorgeous place to go. I was there for a long time. It's a long school, it's over a year long. And a couple months into it, I was having some major problems, like just really tough paying attention, really difficult. Grades started suffering. And, you know, the way that the military does classes, at least at that time, and very much today still, but when it comes to didactic, it's not very interesting. It's like, it's very rigid, and you're in your seat, in your place, and you're there for a very long time. And it was not conducive to how I learn. But it didn't matter, because I come from this family background. And by the way, both my brother and my grandfather went to the same school for different languages, and I can't fail. Like, I can't fail at this stuff. Like, can't do it. So I started to search for different or alternative learning modalities. ways of just other than the normal way of just cramming vocabulary into my brain over and over again. And I found mindfulness, and it worked. I latched onto it very quickly. The readings of, the writings of Thich Nhat Hanh were my first. I consider him my first mindfulness teacher through his writings, and just brilliant. Just so it blew my mind, the simplicity and elegance of these practices. And all of a sudden in class, now I can occupy my body and direct my attention and regulate my attention and retain information and just change my experience. But then I graduated, I made it through that school, did just fine, made it through the rest of my training, and I stopped meditating. I stopped using the practices because the pain point was gone. I made it through school. That pain point was gone. Years later, I ended up joining Naval Special Warfare. I found out that I wasn't really suited for a desk job either. So I joined a program that had me deploying and operating alongside with SEAL teams in Iraq and Afghanistan. And throughout my career doing that, the majority of my career was spent doing that. I spent a very small amount of time at a desk. And I mean, I love that job. It was amazing. And in the pursuit of that and doing that job, I just, things happen in combat. You pick up things along the way, and suffering happens. And there was a point where I realized that I needed to do something. Like I got to do something. I recognized the suffering. That finally I recognized that, number one, the fact that I was suffering and that I was causing suffering also especially within my relationship. So it was at that point that I committed to a daily practice of meditation and inner work. Started doing yoga, started integrating, the mind, the entire system through movement, breath, and meditation, all underpinned by mindfulness. And the effects were extremely fast. The effects were, I was just surprised by the changes that happened when I really truly committed to it and really did the work. And it changed my life so much that I fell in love with life again, and I wanted to share these practices with other people who experience the same things. That is what led me to MPeak and teaching mindfulness in a performance context that is empirically based. It's accessible, very accessible, and directed specifically for high performers in all the domains of our lives. When my last command that I actually retired from brought on our mentor, Pete Kirchmer, who we ended up going through training with, to provide a workshop to my team. And I love the framework, and I know that mindfulness worked, and I loved the framework. So I decided I wanted to learn that framework and teach it. And so still today, I also got a certification to teach yoga. The framework that I created for myself involved recalibrating my nervous system and learning how to direct my conscious thought, learning how to direct my conscious energy. And I did that through breath, meditation, and movement. And I'm super stoked to be sharing those practices with other people.
Awesome. So one of the things we talked about last week when we were prepping was the fact that mindfulness gets thrown around a lot, right? It's one of those terms that we hear everywhere today. And Carli, I think it was you saying, like, it's even like the definition today is a little bit watered down. Can we explore that a little bit? And why you had mentioned that?
It might have actually been Ben that said that, but I can jump in too. And it's something that I've done silent retreats, for extended periods of meditation where I go for 5 or 6 days, and we meditate and move and serve and cook meals together. And the traditional teachers, trained in the ancient traditions, and they say that it's watered down. And I took offense to that at first because, I teach some of those quote unquote techniques that they might consider to be watered down, but I actually think the work that Ben and I teach is very true and very rooted and effective. if someone wants to take it to that next level of the spirituality and the ancient traditions, then it's a doorway to do so. So mindfulness really, it's paying attention intentionally. Like there's a purpose, you're paying attention to the moment without any judgment. Because so often, we have an experience and our mind, especially if there's any bit of suffering involved, our mind immediately says, this shouldn't be happening. Like this moment shouldn't be happening, and it shouldn't be happening in this way. And what we often do is blame ourselves or blame others for why it's happening this way. So that's sort of the not watered down, like true in its truest form, what mindfulness is. It's simply paying attention in the present moment on purpose without any judgment or attachment to that their experience needs to change. I don't know if you would add anything to that, Ben, or...
Oh, yeah, sure. I think that, so there is a graph that we show when we do our workshops, and this graph kind of depicts the growth of publications and writings and material on mindfulness over the past 20 years. When I first learned mindfulness, when I was in school, it was 1996, when I first read Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. I mean, at that point, there were one or fewer than one publications per year on mindfulness, and that has grown exponentially over the past 20 years, particularly in the past 10 years. It has just shot up. It's on this trajectory that's going straight up. So when I first started learning mindfulness, there really wasn't a lot of material. I mean, I had to go to a library to get a book. Now you can just do a Google search for mindfulness, and you will find thousands and thousands and thousands of blogs, of articles, 5 steps to being a mindful leader, or, how to be mindful at home. And the term mindfulness in our language, how we use it, is not quite like a perfect translation of what the original word for mindfulness was. So the translation and how we use it in our language gets a little bit washed out, because somebody's like, yeah, okay, here's my 5 steps to be mindful. I just got to be aware of things. I got to pay attention. I got to, somebody walks into my office, I got to put down what I'm doing and look up for my screen. And it seems in our usage, particularly our linguistic usage, that it's a very simple thing. However, it's a subtle and difficult practice that can make big changes when it's done in a particular way, in a committed way as well. Like it has to be done. The work has to be done every single day. And in my opinion, and I know this anecdotally from speaking with a bunch of people about it, there is a misunderstanding about what it is. People hear the term mindfulness, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to talk about it. Heard all about it. Don't even want to go there. I got business problems that I need solved. And here we're going to talk about like an ancient tradition that has been brought into my office. Like I can look it up. I don't need to pay money for it. I don't need to spend time on it. That is an opinion. That is something that definitely happens. So I think in helping people understand and teaching mindfulness, the very first thing we do is define what it is and what it isn't, so people can understand what exactly are we talking about and what angle are we coming at it from. So that's really important.
Why do you find that in today's world that mindfulness is so important? Is it because of the distractions that we're all dealing with on a daily basis, that our minds are going 100 miles an hour with so many different pieces of information through social media, through the news, through our relationships and our office relationships? Is it because of all of this information, or what's really driving that?
So yeah, I think the interest in it and the need for it, the need for it has driven the interest in it, because it works. Like it works. The reason why so much research and writing is being done on it is because it's a practice that works. And the way that our brains are built through our evolution, we are designed to create meaning in the world as we move through the world. Our brains constantly create meaning. Like our brains are not calculation machines. They don't crunch numbers well. They're not designed. Our brains aren't designed to make numbers or to do spreadsheets. they're designed to create meaning out of disparate parts of data, and then to do all of that for the purpose of survival. And so in our modern world, with all the things that we have access to, and particularly the information that it's always being filtered straight into our eyeballs, through our screens and our computers and our TVs, you name it, we're receiving all sorts of data that's having an impact on us. This mind-body system that we may not be aware at all at any given time of what that information is causing to happen physiologically in our body. We're not aware of it. And when we're not aware of it, if we're not choosing what the effect of that information is going to be, it will be chosen for us. And most often that is a negative effect, because our brains are designed to, through evolution, to pay attention to that which is negative. So we have thought patterns and frames of mind that are ingrained within us as we move through the world. When we are unaware of what we are doing, when we are unaware of them, they are ingrained for us by our experience and the conditions in which we are. So because there is so much data moving, because there's so much right now, there's very little quiet now unless we create it. Because of that, that's why it's so important now. It's important as it's always been for if nothing else, it is for the alleviation of suffering in our lives. And the first step in relieving that is becoming aware, and that from that place we can grow. There is no growth without awareness.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and throw a couple words or terms out there too, just that really jive with everything Ben is saying. You know, in the psychology field, we talk about the paradox of progress, right? So all like all of the technology, all of the gains we've made in humanity, and all the efficiency and being accessible, and boom, 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 we see such an increase in depression, anxiety. And then, you know, if you just peek on the tween scene who have access to social media, bullying, the suffering, it's so interesting because you think human connection, wouldn't that bring about more goodness in the world? But it's not really true human connection. It's not the, you know, I can't get a hold of her, so I'm going to walk over to her house and see her in person. It's the, you know, it's all the electronic, which isn't actually true human connection. So in my private practice, I work with a lot of high performers, and, you know, they're just pushing so hard and overloaded with all of the seeming progress we have, right? Which brings about so much suffering at a core level. And then people can't figure out why they're so unhappy. And it's literally because we lost access to the ability to be still. And still doesn't necessarily even mean not moving. Still can be moving, like you're on a hike, but you're so tuned in to how like amazing nature is around you. Or if you believe in God, like tuned into God and everything. And just, you know, the other piece that I find a lot in the high performance realm is the word we use in the mindfulness field is attachment, right? We're driving so hard for a very specific outcome, and we're raising generations to do the same, you know, be in all the competitive sports so you can not play pro football, but you're not going to have a childhood where you get dirty just in your backyard, because you're always going to be on the football field training all the way up. And then, I have a little thing around that. There's an article called like The Race to Nowhere on in the sport realm. But there's this attachment piece. And so mindfulness helps us, you know, it is amazing to drive towards goals. We need people in the world who are who are striving towards excellence. But like the attachment that it needs to be a certain way actually robs us of all the learning in the process and the fun and all the good stuff that actually helps us be resilient and well and like execute and use our power super effectively, versus driving so hard and having this attachment to looking a certain way. And then we actually lose our zest for life. You know, we lose our zest for our careers. I work with people who do amazing things in different fields, and yet they are so burned out. And in the pandemic, I saw this like profoundly. So that's just kind of using a little bit different language for what Ben said.
I think we experience a lot of that in our day-to-day lives. I mean, I see it in family and friends every single day. So what are some things that we, techniques that we can deploy to center ourselves, to bring us out of that constant drive, to take a step back to allow ourselves to propel even farther forward?
It's a great question. Do you want to jump in first, Ben?
Sure. So beginning with the practice of mindfulness and beginning with what we teach is a core modality is meditation, is learning how to meditate, and learning what is meditation, how do we do it, and committing to it and doing it on a regular basis. The way I see meditation is it's like going to the gym for your mind, for your brain, for the whole system. Like going to the gym, we can sit on our mat, our cushion, or whatever, a chair, whatever comfortable place that you have. And we just, the simplest way to put it is that we practice bringing our attention back to a specific, it may be a specific object, it may be awareness itself. We practice regulating our attention and bringing our attention back, our awareness back over and over again to the present moment experience that we're having. Whatever that may be, we just bring it back over and over again. Every time we bring it back, it's like doing a rep. It is literally the equivalent of doing a rep in the gym. So every time we do that, it builds pathways in the brain that strengthen attention. That's why it's so important. It is like going to the lab and creating the environment that is best for training the attention, for regulating our attention so that we can regulate emotion, and then we can create more connections, new pathways, new neural pathways in our brain, new frames of thinking, new frames of behaving. And it begins with sitting down and being still and silent, which, as we said, is very difficult today, to sit anywhere for 5 minutes without wanting to reach for a phone and check the feed, or what your family's doing or what your friends are doing. So that is where we start, very, very simply, with meditation and learning to be still and learning to train the observer, to train the witness within us that can be present and aware of what's happening both outside of us and within us.
Yeah, and with that helps us to be committed to responding versus reacting. I think it's very easy to begin a practice because we want immediate gains. I'm going to do this because it's going to fix this. I'm going to do this because I'm going to get this out of it. And I think when we commit to a mindfulness, informal practices, just being present in our life and our relationships, or we commit to like a true meditation practice, which absolutely benefits our mindfulness, informal living. There's sort of a, like, what is my purpose or intention here? Kind of, why am I really doing this? Because we live in a culture where it's like, do this program and get this gain, do this and get this gain. Yes, meditation will absolutely improve your performance. Yes, yes, yes. The research can back it up. And there's sort of a surrender to, there is a surrender to the process. I'm going to do this because I know that it is good brain training and it helps me show up more present in my life. It's like this core basic piece. And then when we develop the ability to pause, it's like that moment where you're talking with someone and they say something, and the way my brain moves really fast, so I have a hard time with this. So learning to pause is, I'm going to be working on this for the rest of my life. But just that moment where we just go, and we don't immediately respond, right? Because or react, because that reaction can do such destruction. So I think that would just be another piece, starting to be aware of, am I reacting versus am I responding? And that can be externally, like it can be in interpersonal relationships or interacting with the world. And that can also be, am I reacting versus responding to a physiological sensation, to an emotion, to a thought pattern, like slowing it down. What's going on inside me? Am I just reacting to something that's going on inside me because our brains like to make up stories about what's going on? Or can I pause and say, I'm going to be curious about this before I just launch into the next thing? Because I think we get ourselves in a lot of trouble by just reacting, and our behavior follows our emotions and our thoughts. So that would be another thing: responding versus reacting. Yeah.
So do you think through that? Go ahead.
Just to dovetail on that a little bit, Ben, the other day you talked a little bit about the OODA loop. How does that fit into this? That instead of react, I'm going to respond. How does OODA loop fit into that? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the OODA loop is a framework that kind of describes how we observe and make decisions and act within. Particularly, it was developed for fighter pilots by a fighter pilot, and especially if we look at it in the tactical sense of a dogfight. Each pilot, let's say you take two pilots engaged in a dogfight against one another. The OODA loop stands for, it's OODA, observe, orient, decide, act. So those two pilots who are engaged in combat with one another are constantly going through this cycle of observing the environment, everything that's in it, their own instruments, their craft, the other pilot, and everything that's going on with the other pilot. They're observing that. They're orienting themselves in space to that threat. They're orienting themselves mentally and physically to the threat. The entire time they're orienting, they're observing, and they're orienting themselves in relation to what they observe. And then they have to decide what to do. They make a decision, and then they have to act. At any time in this framework, it can go from observe and orient back to observe, or it could go to the decision and back to observe, or back to orient. The loop can be restarted at any given time based on situations and conditions within the environment. So where it's a helpful framework that fits very well with mindfulness, because I believe that mindfulness occupies observe and orient. We learn when we practice mindfulness, we learn over and over again to observe and to orient ourselves in a specific way, to be aware on purpose. And then in orienting ourselves towards this awareness, we're doing so with a curious mindset, non-judgment. We're going to orient ourselves with acceptance to the conditions that are here. So mindfulness trains our ability to observe, our ability to be aware, that trains the witness part of our mind that can see clearly. The whole point is to see clearly so that we can make decisions and act accordingly. It creates a space for us to make decisions and act, as opposed to just constantly reacting according to predetermined frameworks that we grew up with or that we've developed over time. So the OODA loop is a military framework that mindfulness, I believe, fits in nicely. It occupies observing and orienting, because when we're moving through the world mindfully, I'm constantly observing my state. And I'm constantly regulating my state. I'm aware of my state. I'm aware of what's happening around me, and I'm aware of my orientation to the conditions that exist, how I'm reacting. As something happens, I can either just do a pre-programmed reaction or response that exists forever, or I could say, oh, okay, I'm feeling this. This is the situation. I can observe that my body is doing a certain thing in this situation. And now that gives me space, because I understand more clearly about how I am showing up in relation to these conditions.
We use the term interoceptive awareness in MPEAK, which is really, it's really understanding, I'd like to say your inner grid, but, on all of the physiological sensations that we experience and our emotions and our thoughts, and it connects to what Ben's talking about. Like, our brain wants to label, my heart's racing right now, that's bad. Our brain wants to label something about that, like my heart's racing, or whatever it would be. I'm training right now for my first freediving certification class this coming weekend, and I've been pushing myself in the gym. And because I know pain so well, it's very easy to either override it or to have some label like something is bad. So I've been experimenting with what is the meaning of this pain, and how can I work with it effectively, and how can I potentially breathe into it and soften around it so that I can work through this and actually get an incredible workout on, on this Pilates reformer machine. And so it's been fascinating to apply what we do in MPEAK, because it is about working with a variety of sensations, some of which don't feel good. And you could use that, it's physiological sensations, but also we're feeling beings who think. We feel stuff all the time that doesn't feel good. And so how do we work with that effectively? But in the performance realm, we really talk about, mind, body, emotions, and the awareness piece of how we're even labeling it. Ben, what was the term you used for the schemas or the templates or the things we put on stuff? What did you say? Your grid or your not?
I'm not sure. I might I might have. I'm talking about the frames that we create.
Frames. So we have frames around, like I have frames around physical pain, right? I have frames around what's happening with my knee, that I could so easily not do things, and so for the injured athletes out there, the injured people out there, the chronic health conditions, we can get so in a frame of mind, like people with I think like bad digestive problems, like I'm hurting right now, so I shouldn't go out, all the medical conditions that people work with that hold them back. And this all connects to the performance realm. I'm totally rambling. We can take this out. I'll pass it to Ben.
But I was going to say, but as somebody who has experienced pain in many different realms, both physically, mentally, not all pain is bad.
No.
But having the discipline, as you're talking about, to actually understand what that pain is, what is the meaning of that pain? Is this, I need to stop what I'm doing immediately? Or is this pain that I can kind of sort of push through to get me to where I'm actually going?
100%.
We're trained though in culture as it sits right now. We're trained to not embrace pain. We're trained, like when suffering comes up, I'm going to do everything possible to get back to comfortable and turn it off. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to go there. And the unfortunate piece of that is that's where a lot of the growth happens, is when you get through, you cut through the suffering, you cut through the pain. On the other side of that, there's usually what you're looking for. But you have to have the grit to get through it. You have to be able to, like you said, label the pain, understand where it's coming from, what message is it trying to send you, and then how do I need to react to it once I've observed. So
yeah, there's something in Brené Brown's Rising Strong curriculum where she calls being high. She calls it high centered, and it's a way of dealing with pain. In that curriculum, we talk a lot about dealing with pain. So imagine a car getting stuck on a median. And you're stuck there. And if you back up, it's going to hurt. And if you move forward, it's not going to hurt. It's going to destroy your car. And if you move forward, you scrape the bottom of your vehicle. And so a lot of us do this in life. We live high centered. We can't go back because we can't go back. We're already stuck in this spot. But going forward is super painful. Right. So that we can live there, and it's a very stuck place to live, not really working with pain, but in fact, sort of working with pain because it's painful to be stuck. So I find a lot of the high performers that I work with, they're, wanting to drive in a certain area of their life, but they're stuck somehow, and so that mindfulness really helps us, tune back into to the present moment, tune back into what's most important to us, tune back into the things, the ever-present goodness that's in front of us, and really ground and then figure out, okay, what are the next steps right here, right now, rather than launching ahead? Like, what do I need to know right now to show up and unstick myself, to show up effectively and powerfully, and maybe enjoy life too. It's good to have a little fun every now and then. So,
and have a discipline and a process that you can lean back into when those situations happen.
yeah, I think, Pete Kirchner will talks about this. He talks about this in our training, and he wrote our workbook that's used for MPEAK. So he talks about this in there, that eventually, like, the outcome is the process. So eventually the discipline, like, I always think of him when I sit down to meditate, when I set a timer, because he says, eventually you'll meditate and you won't even set a timer. You'll just stop when you're done. And that's what that's what I often do, when I can, but often it's, but other times it's discipline and just fitting it in. So I set my timer, but that process actually becomes a way of living over time. So the discipline of, like, right, it's just like, oh, I know I need to do this right now because I can't focus, or, oh, I need to do this right now and sit because I'm tired, or I'm emotional, or I know I need to do something that I really want to show up for, like talking on a podcast. So I'm going to make sure I spend some time in my backyard meditating this morning. That was me this morning. So it's becomes this way of varying, like, a tool that we use to show up effectively in our life for a variety of reasons.
Right. Discipline as a whole allows us to not have to think about it. We just go to the discipline, right? I think about the gym. I'm an early morning gym guy.
Yeah.
I can win that fight with my inner self every morning because that's the discipline. I just do it. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to go, oh, what does this mean? It's just, I've been doing it so long, I just get up and do it.
Yeah, and I'll just, John, you want to say something? I'll just say discipline is an interesting word when you get in the high performer realm with people who have burned themselves. So it's not uncommon for me to have conversations with people who have to reclaim the word discipline because they've been so disciplined that discipline means punishment. And so for some people, there's a reclaiming of, like, no, actually, this is like a movement towards what's good for me and my greatest, like, my best interest is involved in discipline. But for some people, it just can bring about a lot of feelings. And yeah.
Well, and that's exactly where I wanted to go with this, is I think, like, when you put grit in the name of your podcast, it's really easy for people to think this is just hustle and grind. And we're just going to hammer through stuff. And there's no room for self-compassion. There's no room for empathy. There's no room for mindfulness. It's just go. And that is not at all, like, grit meets growth. It's the combination of the two. There's a time to work hard. There's a time to go hard. But there's also, you have to make room for that growth part. You have to make room for the mind part because they're connected so tightly, like we've been talking about today.
Well, I think, Carli, you mentioned this the other day. Like, you gave almost a definition of grit. What happens when you keep getting hit? Grit is what happens when you keep getting knocked down, you keep getting hit. It's what you do with that.
Yeah, 100%. And I love Angela Duckworth's definition that it really revolves right around, there's this core purpose or core intention that no matter how hard we get hit, it means so much to us that we're going to keep rising. We're going to keep learning. We're going to, the setbacks, the delays, my goal was to do this at this time and it hasn't happened yet. And that's life, right? And are we going to be knocked off, or it's going to mean that much that we're going to stick with it and we're going to trust and practice self-trust to keep going for that, right? it's so important. And we need people to use their gifts. People have really cool gifts to contribute in this world. Yeah.
Well, so this conversation is absolutely fantastic. Really enjoying it. I know there's so much more that we can cover that we probably won't get to today, but I'm hopeful that we can have you both back as guests again in the future. I know you've got some busy schedules here, and as we all do going forward, but hopefully we can cycle that back around and and continue this dialogue.
And along those lines, where can people find you guys? Like, where can they find you if they're curious about this? They're curious about digging in more. How do they do that?
Yeah, we can. You can find us on mpeakteam.com, mpeakteam.com, mpeakteam.com. That's our endeavor together as we teach this framework of mindful performance. We do workshops, coaching, various high performance communities, women leaders, the finance sector, medicine, the military, government, law enforcement. We've taught and coached a broad range of people in a broad range of disciplines on how to use these practices. So down the line, what people should do to find us is go to that website, get on our mailing list. As we have more workshops coming up, we can get people informed on that. What we're really interested in doing is combining experiential and mindful experiences. So things that combine, that's not just in a quiet room or a didactic setting or sitting on a meditation cushion, something that means getting out in the world and experiencing something that causes our bodies to react in a certain way. And I think very importantly is to take this to what I call taking it from the mat and into the world. So from skydiving to scuba to free diving to anything outdoors, walking through nature in a mindful way is a much different experience than going for a walk. So it's a completely different experience. Going fishing, standing at the shore and fishing mindfully is a much different experience than fishing and thinking about all sorts of random things or just being swept away in whatever's going on. So while it can be relaxing always, there's an aspect that we can bring to it when we train our attention and train our sense of our relation to the world around us as we engage in the world. And I think that's the most important thing to remember here. Like, it doesn't take the pain away. It doesn't make us not feel emotions that are challenging or painful or difficult, but we can learn more about how we show up in the world. And then we can learn to regulate that and learn, most importantly, our relationship to things like pain, our relationship to things like suffering. And that's what taking this off the mat and into the world and practicing mindful in like an active way. That's why it's so important.
I'll just add, we have a sweet spot for also supporting teens and adults with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That's the full, we call ADHD, and the multiple types of ADHD. And so that is an area we're also, doing coaching, and we'll eventually run a program for teens and adults. That's one of my niches in the Twin Cities. So it's an area near and dear to my heart. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you both for coming on today. Greatly appreciate it. It's fantastic getting to know both of you, and look forward to future conversation.
Thank you. Truly a privilege. Grateful to be here.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. That wraps it up for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the Grit Meets Growth tribe. And thanks for growing along with us and being part of this journey together. If you know someone who needs to hear the conversation we had today, please share it. If you got something out of this conversation, please leave us a review. And finally, if you want to make sure you don't miss future episodes, just remember to subscribe. We're thankful for each and every one of you. And as my co-host and good friend Chris Cathers always says, make it a great day.